Gingerbread latte. Okay. Hi everyone, it's Christina. I hope you're all well. And I'm sure you guys know by now, based on my last video, I was in Cabo San Lucas, beautiful Cabo San Lucas, for a wedding. So because I just went on a trip, everything that I needed to do is still fresh in my memory, and I thought it would be helpful for you guys, if you guys are planning on going on a trip pretty soon, to give you guys a little bit of a breakdown on what you should do before going on your trip. A lot of these things can be easily forgotten, and so I think just talking about the things you should do will relieve a lot of stress and anxiety. I've actually divided my tips into 5 categories because I have a lot of tips. I have like 30 or 40 tips, I think. I just thought it would be easier to divide it up, and I will be posting it on my blog as well. So if you guys want something to print off instead, you can go to my blog and print it off if you like. So let's get started. My first category is the health category. Health is number 1 in my opinion, so I thought I would talk about this first. Tip number 1, make sure you have all of your medication for the length of time that you're going to be away. It can be pretty dangerous if you don't have enough medication, so it's just really important to make sure that you have all of your health essentials, basically. For example, I sometimes get very severe migraines, and so I need my Advil liquid gels, my extra strength liquid gels. I also have a very weak stomach, so I make sure to take Gravol with me. I get motion sickness on planes, in cars, on boats, anything moving, you name it. I don't feel well. So I definitely need Gravol with me. And yeah, if you guys have things like asthma or allergies or, heart conditions, things like that, it's just really important to make sure that you have enough for the length of your trip. Tip number 2. Make sure to visit your doctor before you go on your trip. I think there's 2 reasons why people should visit a doctor before going on a trip. The first is, especially for people who have health conditions, just to have a checkup, make sure they're able to, go on a plane, or, if they're planning on doing a certain activity, talk to their doctor about it first, make sure that they're healthy enough to do that activity. And the second reason you should visit a doctor is to make sure that you don't need any vaccinations or anything before you go. Otherwise, you can get really, really sick, and that's never good. Tip number 3. It's a good idea to have an emergency contact, especially if you're traveling alone. I know a few people who have, backpacked alone, for example, and it's always really important to have like your mom or your dad or your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, friend, whatever. Just have somebody that's close to you to have as an emergency contact, and check in with them regularly, because you want to let them know that you're well and you're safe. It's just better when you check in with people who care about you, just for their sake and also for your safety. Tip number 5, make sure that you have travel insurance when you're going to another country. Some people don't have any benefits whatsoever, and they have to purchase it through a brokerage. I personally have extended medical benefits through my work, and then I also have a credit card that offers travel insurance. So I'm covered, and I double checked to make sure I was covered before I left for my trip, because, accidents happen, mistakes happen. It's also for your peace of mind, in case you need to go to the hospital for whatever reason, that you're good and you're covered. You don't have to spend sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for something that could have been covered. Tip number 6. On the plane, I like to bring my own healthy snacks. There are restrictions with what you can bring on the plane, like when you go through security. You can't bring certain items, so you just have to make sure what the restrictions are in your country. But yeah, usually I don't really like plain food. I just think that it's not that high quality food, and it's often not that healthy either. So I like to make my own stuff and pack it in a little baggie and then snack on it when I get hungry. Tip number 7, bring a water bottle. I recently tried to be more conscious about the choices I make regarding the environment. I've been reading a lot of articles on how bad plastic bottles are for the environment. And I mean, I still have a lot to learn about, reducing my carbon footprint and things like that, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. And I've ordered a glass water bottle. It's really cute, and I will show it to you guys when I get it. And I've also ordered a water bottle specifically for traveling. It's a compactable water bottle, so you can make it smaller when you put it in your bag. And then you just fill up your water bottle after you go through security. So I just think that that's like a really good idea, and you reduce the amount of plastic that's being used, so that's always a good thing. And it's also really important to stay hydrated, especially when you're in an airplane, because the air is so dehydrating. It just sucks all of the hydration from your skin and your body and things like that. So it's really important to stay hydrated on a flight. Moving on to my second category, I'm going to talk about documents. So these are more like formalities that you need to make sure is in line, because sometimes when a document's not right, for example, your passport's expired, you're not going to be able to leave the country. Tip number 8, make sure you can find your passport. I have in the past packed the night before, and then I had a little bit of a panic attack because I couldn't find my passport. But in order to just avoid that stress completely, just have a designated place to put your passport. So I have, this is actually my wallet when I'm traveling. It's a very inexpensive wallet. I got it at Chapters, and it's really functional. This is where I put my traveling documents, like my itinerary, which I'll get to later. And then when you open it up, this is what it looks like. This is labeled passport, and I have my little passport in here. This is labeled luggage ticks. I don't really use luggage tickets because I travel pretty light and I use carry-on usually, which I'll talk about again later. So instead I carry my Nexus pass in here, which I'll talk about soon. And then on the other side here is the boarding pass and then cash. So I use like pretty much all of these pockets. But yeah, this is where I keep my passport, and then I just put this in my luggage when I'm done with it. So I know exactly where it is, and there's no stress or hassle trying to find my passport. So tip number 9, make sure your passport isn't expiring soon. I think that there's a rule, if your passport's going to expire within 6 months or something, you can't go to certain countries. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but yeah, it's just really important to make sure that your passport isn't expiring, and if it is expiring soon, make sure to renew it well ahead of time. Tip number 10, it's also important to make sure that you don't need a visa to get into the country you're going to. Some countries do require traveler's visas, so it's really important to check to make sure that you don't need one. And if you do need one, make sure to apply for one well in advance, because sometimes it takes a while to get it. Tip number 11. So I don't know if every country has this, but in Canada we have something called a Nexus pass. And basically what it is, it's a fast track pass through security. So you have to check what the requirements are in your country if your country offers this kind of program. But I have used Nexus many times, not just when I'm flying, but also when I'm going across the border to the States. It's just so much faster to go through the Nexus line. And again, it just reduces so much stress because you don't have to spend all this time waiting in line. And just on that note too, if you do have a Nexus pass or something similar to an Access Pass, make sure it doesn't expire either. Make sure it's not expiring either, because if it's expired, you can't use it. Tip number 12. If you're traveling to another country, you're going to have to fill out a customs form, and often they'll ask you where you're going to stay, and they'll ask you to write down the address. In the past, I really just don't know what the address is. I just know like what hotel I'm staying at, for example. So it's just good to have a record of the address that you're staying at, because otherwise, you know, it's going to be a hassle to try filling out that customs form when you don't know what the address is. Tip number 13. It's also really important to have all of your addresses updated on your luggage, especially if you're checking luggage. If, for example, your luggage gets lost, at least you know that you have the address written down. It's really important to make sure that you've updated your address on all of your documents and your luggage and everything. On to the next category. This category is all about money. Tip number 14. Phone your bank and tell them where you're going. You plan on using your bank card or your credit card during your trip, and your bank notices that you are trying to make a transaction in another country, they could flag that and prevent you from using the card because they don't know that you're there and they think it's fraudulent. So it's always a good idea to just phone your bank and tell them where you're going, how long you're going for, and that you're going to be using your credit card. Tip number 15. This kind of goes hand in hand with my earlier tip. Be careful with your credit card. And I mean, this is just a tip generally. I am very careful with my credit cards. I don't allow people to take my credit card because they can scan it and use my information. If I'm going to be using your credit card, I have it in my hand, and if they offer to take it, I will just say like, oh, I'll put a chip in, you know, I just feel more comfortable doing that. And a lot of the time the merchants or the waiters or whatever really understand that, and they'll say okay, and they'll bring you the machine, or you go to the machine and put it in yourself. Tip number 16. I would also phone your mobility company to let them know that you are going to go out of the country. Roaming charges can be so expensive, you guys, so it's really important to see what kind of roaming plans your company offers. Sometimes like it's a flat daily rate of like $6 or $7, which is way better than if you didn't get that rate. I personally use a lot of data on my phone just because I'm on Instagram and using all these apps all the time. So it's just really important to make sure to take that extra step so that you're not faced with like a $500 phone bill at the end of the month that you didn't expect. Tip number 17, turn off your electricity at home. This is a huge money saver. No electricity is being used, no heat is being used, and you are saving money, which is always a good thing. And it's good for the environment too. Tip number 18, make sure you don't have any liquids over 100 mils, I think it is. I only travel with a carry-on usually, like I said before, and it's really important for me, especially because I have a lot of pretty expensive beauty products that I use, that they don't get confiscated in security, because that's just such a pain. I've had that happen to me before. But I actually recently learned that you also can't have too many bottles under 100 mils. You have to be able to put them in a 1 liter bag. Tip number 19, invest in a bag scale. So I'll show you the bag scale I use. So this is called My Carbon. It's just like a silver and white scale. It works pretty well. It's a good idea to bring this with you actually when you go on your trip, because if you plan on purchasing something or a bunch of different things, which people often do, your bag often gets heavier when you come back from a trip. This is really light, doesn't take up a lot of room, and it's a money saver for sure. And it's also a stress reliever if you know that your bag is under the weight limit. Otherwise, it can get costly to purchase another bag, which has happened to me before. So learn from me. Tip number 20. This goes hand in hand with my previous tip. Have a few pounds leeway in case you plan on purchasing anything. Even if you don't plan on purchasing anything, I often find that I end up purchasing at least one or two things. So yeah, it's always good to just have a little bit of extra space and weight in your luggage bag in case, you know, you find something that you absolutely have to have and you can't live without, which happened to me in Cabo. So I definitely was thankful that I had a little bit of extra room in my bag. Otherwise I would have been in trouble. Trust me. Tip number 21. Check the restrictions on what you can bring back home. So if you do plan on purchasing something in another country, sometimes there's restrictions on, you know, how much money you can spend. Like, for example, if you're just going across the border, like I do sometimes to go to Seattle to shop, there are money restrictions on how much you can purchase duty-free. It's really important to just know the rules with purchasing things, so make sure to educate yourself before you go on your trip. My fourth section of tips is basically like organization / stress relief tips. There's a bunch of different things that I do to be completely organized and set for my trip, so I wanted to share that with you guys. Tip number 22, use a checklist. There's so many checklists on Pinterest, for example, and different blogs. There's so many great checklists, you guys. I use a universal checklist, so it's just like one checklist for every trip. Because it's universal, there's things like, you know, umbrellas and then bikinis. So if you're going to like somewhere like Cabo, you probably don't need an umbrella. So basically what I do is I just cross off the things that I don't need on my trip, and it just keeps things pretty simple. I don't have to look for another checklist. And it's a pretty complete checklist too. So if you guys are interested in using the one that I use, I will link it down below. And what I do with my checklist is, you know, I write down, like, for example, underwear. If I'm bringing 7 pairs of underwear, I write down the number 7 next to it. So I know, like, when I am packing up to go home, I know that I have 7 pairs of underwear and I need to make sure that they're there. So it's just a way of making sure that you don't forget anything either. It's just the worst feeling when you leave a place and then you realize that you forgot something. Oh my gosh, you guys, I forgot my laptop at a hotel once, and it was just like the most stressful thing of my life because my laptop is literally my life. Yeah, it's just so much better when you have a checklist because then you know exactly what you brought and you know exactly what you need to bring back. Tip number 23, create an itinerary. This is something that I honestly love to do. I created an itinerary for the trip I just went on, and it's so great. You know, I mean, I really love schedules. I'm definitely one of those people who will plan everything beforehand. But I also like to leave a little room for spontaneity. So, for example, like in Cabo, we went to Cabo for our wedding. So 3 of the 7 days we were there were just for the wedding. Like, they were wedding events. So all 3 of those days were booked. So I put that in my itinerary. The other 4 days, you know, was a little bit more of a free-for-all. So what I did was I designated 2 of those days for whatever I wanted to do, whatever I felt like. And then I designated 2 of those days for pre-planned events. And it worked out perfectly. I ended up doing a couple things that I didn't think that I would be doing on the days that I was basically had all the free time in the world. And then 2 of those days I actually did what I wanted to do. Yeah, creating an itinerary is great. If you guys want to know what I use to create my itinerary, I use Travify. This isn't sponsored or anything, it's just something that I have used in the past and I like it and I'll use in the future. So I'll link it down below if you guys are interested in that. Tip number 24. This one's obvious but worth sharing. Make sure to have somebody take care of your pets and your plants. Obviously, you know, we have a family dog and I would never forget to make sure that somebody is taking care of her. So yeah, I doubt that anybody would forget about their pet. But I think plants are a little bit more of a forgetful thing. So make sure to plan well in advance. Well in advance. Tip number 25. This is relating to your job. Make sure to turn on your out of office emails. And I also think it's really important to check up on work once in a while when you're on vacation, especially if it's a longer vacation. Some people just turn everything off completely, which I think is healthy in certain circumstances. Like if you turn everything off for 2 weeks, I think that's a bit long. I mean, maybe I should just be speaking for myself. I have a pretty demanding job and I just know like when I get back to work, I would be like bombarded with hundreds of emails. So I actually just took like 20 minutes to half an hour every day just to go through my emails, organize my emails, make sure that I have a zero inbox. If you guys don't know what that is, I can explain it to you. Just ask me or I can do a video on it. But yeah, I really like to stay organized with every aspect of my life. And I know like when I come back to work, I would hate to see like hundreds of emails that I have to go through. So it's just easier for me to check up on work. And it's also just more responsible for me to do that too in case somebody needed something. Tip number 26. Pack early and pack lightly. I have done the, you know, panic packing night before or hours before, and I would never do that again. I actually like to pack it, you know, a week in advance to make sure that I don't need to purchase anything, especially if I'm not checking a bag. You have to be extra organized. This is a very minimalist thing to do as well. In my opinion, the key to minimalist packing is planning your outfits and, you know, having an idea of what you're going to wear for each day or each activity. This kind of packing also avoids the, you know, packing all of your wardrobe because you don't know what you're going to feel like wearing. I've done this before, you know, like I've packed like my entire wardrobe and I ended up only using like 6 things. So yeah, it's just a lot better to know what you're going to wear, how you're going to wear it, and things like that. Tip number 27. Invest in organizing cubes, you guys. It's so great having an organized bag instead of just throwing everything in it. For my next trip, I think I will make a video on how I organize my carry-on. I think I might be going to Charleston next year in October, and I might be going on another trip between now and then. So I will definitely make a video for you guys if that's what you want. Just to show you guys how I organize my suitcase. It's really fun. Tip number 28. It actually goes hand in hand with when you're packing. Make sure that you check the weather forecast. Weather forecasts are not always reliable, but I think it's a good idea to just get an idea of what the weather's going to be like where you're going, because the weather is a very big determining factor in what people wear. Tip number 29, check in before your flight. This relieves so much stress, in my opinion, when you just take, 20 minutes to half an hour to check into your flight and have your boarding pass available. When I went to Cabo, I checked in before my flight and I actually had my boarding pass on my phone, which was really convenient. I didn't even need like a paper boarding pass. I just had my phone, which I often carry in my hand anyway. And then I just opened up the wallet app on my phone and everybody just scanned the boarding pass. So all I needed was my phone. It's incredible. Tip number 30, Before you get on your flight, make sure that you have your entertainment needs. Netflix now offers downloads, which is great. I'm so happy with that. Yeah, so I downloaded like a few TV shows and a couple movies on my phone. Unfortunately, YouTube doesn't really have that yet. I watch a lot of YouTube. You can download, but I think that you need to pay for a subscription or something, which I don't really want to do. If you're a book reader, make sure that if you have a Kindle or something, make sure that you have your books ready to go. I personally also like to work on my computer when I'm on the plane. I just think it's a really productive way of using my time. I just feel really good when I can do something productive during my time in the air. And I often do, take my laptop with me and do a little bit of work that I don't need Wi-Fi for, and so I make sure to download everything that I need beforehand. Tip number 31, on the same note, check the entertainment on your flight. Sometimes you can download like the airline's app. If they don't have like the actual screens in front of you, some of the planes don't, you can use your phone or your laptop and you can connect to your airline, and then they'll have complimentary movies and videos for you too. I've had a little bit of problems like with JavaScript or something on my laptop. I don't know why. And then with my phone, I needed the app, which I didn't download beforehand. So I couldn't really use the complimentary service. So yeah, I just recommend that you look into that if you want to use their services. Tip number 32. I think it's really important to be comfortable on your flights. I'm pretty tall, so I definitely look for the deals for like business class or first class. And if that's too expensive, then I try using the emergency exits because they have a lot more legroom. I also like using the aisle seat because I'm not like stepping over everybody every time I need to use the washroom, and I use the washroom often. And I also like to get up just to move my legs around, just to move my body and circulate my blood and things like that. I think it's worth investing in comfort. And that also includes like if you want like a neck pillow or a mask or something, just make sure to have all of your comfort supplies with you. Tip number 33, make sure to back up your computer if you're bringing it with you. I can't stress this enough. It would be horrible if something happened to your computer, if you dropped it when you were traveling, or if it got lost or stolen. For me, like I said before, my entire life is in this computer, and I mean my phone as well. I can't live without my computer or my phone. So I always make sure to back it up whenever I'm going on a trip. I actually just back it up at the end of every month, and I also back it up just before I go on a trip. Tip number 34. If you're going to be in a part of a world that has a different kind of outlet, it's important to invest in a universal adapter, and not just any adapter. You want a really high quality adapter. The adapter that I bought was really cheap, and it just ruined my curling iron. So I really recommend that you get something, do a little bit of research. You can get some good ones on Amazon. And I also recommend investing in one that is like I said, universal. So wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, you just need to bring that little adapter with you, and it'll change to any kind of outlet that you need. Tip number 35. This is my final tip. Just be sure to charge all of your electronics before you go on the flight. It's kind of annoying when you have, stuff that you want to watch or stuff that you need to do, and then all of a sudden your computer or your phone dies. I think it's just a really good idea to have everything 100% charged before you go on a flight. And also bring a charger yourself, a portable charger. I showed you my portable charger in a couple of videos ago in my What's in My Purse video. and I like it because you can charge more than 2 things at once, and it charges up to 4 times over. So yeah, I feel like that is everything that I wanted to tell you guys. That's 35 tips. There might be some things that I missed or forgot to tell you guys. If there's something that I didn't tell you guys in my video that you do, leave it in the comment box below, because I really love getting advice and tips from other people as well, and maybe learn some things that I didn't know before. So anyway, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye. I think it's time for another Starbucks. I'm gonna go there now.